This episode of the Prestige TV podcast is brought to you by Coffee Mate.
Coffee Mate has been searching the globe for flavors that pair perfectly with coffee.
So when they heard that the new season of HBO's The White Lotus was set in Thailand, they were inspired to brew up 2 new flavors, Thai iced coffee and pina colada flavored creamers.
They're available for a short time only. So for the love of coffee, go try them now.
Hello, welcome back to the Prestige TV podcast feed. I'm Joanna Robinson.
I'm Rob Mahoney.
We're here today to talk to you about Season 3, Episode 4 of White Lotus, Hide or Seek. There's a lot going on the Prestige feed this week because you and I are doing 3 whole ass entire Prestige episodes together this week. Rob, what are we covering?
We are indeed. We're covering White Lotus, obviously. That's why we're here today. We
Correct.
will be taping an episode of The Pit that will be dropping in the indeterminate future.
Great.
Covering through episode 11. Cannot wait. We've been getting, Joe, a lot of people clamoring for our specific takes on The Pit, on some of the big revelations of the recent episodes.
Absolutely.
A lot going on in the ER, to say the least. And of course, we're covering Severance. Every week, all week, the emails are streaming in. They are increasingly unhinged. I'm loving every second of it.
In addition, of course, Bill and Mallory and I are covering White Lotus on Sunday nights immediately after the episode ends. You can catch that on YouTube or on Spotify or listen to it on a podcast app of your choice. A lot going on the Prestige feed this week. In addition to Mallory and I are covering Yellow Jackets, Daredevil, The Last of Us trailer, all that sort of stuff over in the House of Our feed. So there's a lot happening.
Are you, Joe, up on Paradise?
I have not watched a single second of Paradise.
You know what? It was like pulpy fun, and then one episode later in the season just kicks into high fucking gear.
Is it episode 7? Like that's what I've heard.
Episode 7 really pulls it together in a fascinating way.
You think Joanna would like Paradise?
I do.
Okay. I trust you because you were the one who was like, Joanna, you're going to hate Landman. And you were right. Okay.
Well, there's fewer speeches about like Chinese lithium mines and how they're ruining the environment. So I think you're going to be open to this.
Oh, fingers crossed for 0 speeches about that. we can dare to dream. This is maybe best saved for the Severance podcast, but I'll just say it today. We learned a thing. We did a little unboxing experiment on the Severance pod on Friday, and I got some feedback that mostly what people saw was my laptop and not like the items themselves. So I have a lot to learn about unboxing. That was my first time. Thanks for bearing with. But if you wanted to watch me half unbox some Severance stuff, we did that on the pod last week. Okay. Quick opening question for you, Rob Mahoney.
Yes.
What was the worst mistake of the episode? Was it my guy talk, leaving the gun out, or was it Belinda straight up slow-mo mean mugging a guy she knows?
That was not great.
Did a murder. Which are you picking?
The gun is bad.
Yeah.
But look, I've been hard on Guy Talk.
Yeah.
I've been skeptical
You
of
sure
his
have.
ability to read the room.
Yeah.
We're gonna give him some grace today. Not in the professional sense, but at least in the personal sense. Professionally, he might be the worst person at this job in the entire hotel. Like in terms of fulfilling his specific capacity. Very bad at his job.
I can't defend it. I'm not inclined to.
Okay.
However, personally, where are you on Mook on Guy Talk?
I think we just have to look at the facts of this episode, which is Mook is reciprocating, I would say, in a degree that is slightly different than in previous episodes. She is flagging him down. She is pursuing him, wanting him to come watch her dance. She is swinging by in her dancing outfit just to show it off a little bit. And I will say her initial response to being asked out on the date, I read as like, oh, I'm not sure that she ever actually agreed to it before Guy Talk had to rush off. But it seems like later in the episode, we have some confirmation that they are planning for a date.
Okay. So date, come watch me dance. She looks so beautiful and cute in her dancing regalia. He just
the golden hour sunbeams behind her head. Like the whole scene is coming together. And I will say this. We got many, many great emails from people kind of walking us through some of the specifics of Thai courtship and the dating in this region of the world in general, specifically one from Dillis that I really appreciated, where Dillis talked about kind of the archetypes of Thai and Southeast Asian cinema and TV and how Mook and Guy Talk kind of fall into those ideas. This gentle but persistent guy, this coy, sweet girl, and that based on that read, it does seem like they're kind of falling into those modes. They are sort of giving a very familiar presentation, which might let Guy Talk off the hook as far as my previous concerns about how he would react if Mook wasn't as interested as he was. That said, on a show like White Lotus, the idea that we're getting a very familiar presentation potentially of a type of romance does not make me feel great about their chances for these two crazy kids to end up together.
The actors who play Mook and Guy Talk were, the pair that they featured in the after episode interview on HBO this week. And Lalisa, who plays Mook, was talking about how ambitious she is, how she wants more, she wants a bigger life, she wants a better life, she wants to leave, she wants to travel. Guy Talk's like, happy to be incompetent at my job here at the White Lotus forever, and so that has me a little concerned. Not that he will rage out in any kind of way, but something Mal has been talking about in the pod we do with Bill from the start is her concern that he will try to prove himself to her in some way that might go bad, or alternatively, she just simply won't. It's not the end of the world, but she simply won't pick him in the end because he's not what she's looking for. She's looking for someone, some beefy bodyguard who can take her around the world. So, I am, as ever, rooting for Guy Talk.
Even after the gun snafu of this week,
feel very disappointed in him that he left the gun out. But to go back to your point, Golden Hour Mook, Golden Hour Lalisa with the flowers and who among us may not?
Distraction is very understandable, but just put it back in the safe.
Put it back in the box.
Seriously, the bare minimum. Exactly. Carry it with you. I don't care.
All right, so I have a kind of a big picture question to start with here. We are at the midway point of the season. I've been hearing, it's interesting, covering both Severance and White Lotus right now. I really feel like we're at this crux of people have forgotten how to watch television week to week.
They sure have.
And I feel like people misremember the cadence of previous seasons of White Lotus. And on Severance, that's a different thing we could talk about on the Severance pod, but I feel like people are used to maybe watching Severance season 1 as a binge, and so sort of some of the peaks and valleys of the plot and the rhythms are flummoxing people. But I've heard from plenty of people that they think this season of White Lotus is boring.
Yeah.
I think season 4 is we're ramping up. We're headed towards a full moon party. I think we're headed towards excitement. But do you think this season is measurably different from any of the previous seasons of White Lotus, and or just simply are you having a good time with it?
I am having a good time with it. I don't feel that it's measurably different. To me, this show has always been some variety of this. A bunch of different character studies, kind of overlapping, kind of not. Various boiling points reaching their temperature over a handful of episodes. I don't really consider White Lotus to be a super plot-heavy show, which is why the kind of dangling bait of the dead bodies is always such a fun and silly part of it, because it's so clear what's happening there. But I'm never really waiting for White Lotus to explode. Maybe I'm waiting for some characters to bump up into each other in a different way. We've gotten all these hints about Tim and Rick, for example, how much they dislike each other. And it's at some point they're going to collide, at least I would hope, in a way that's kind of fun and interesting. And I'm eager to see it, but I'm not waiting for the next plot development in White Lotus, the show about a bunch of rich people at a luxury resort sitting around and pulling each other apart. I'm just kind of watching them pull each other apart.
It always seems like I remember this from previous seasons, that it's a character study show, right? It's a comedy of manners kind of show with a fake mustache on it that makes it a sort of mystery show. It's not really what it is, but it's part of the hook to get people watching, but it's always been this kind of slow burn. And I think if you go back and rewatch or reconsider previous seasons, you'll see similar things. That being said, if people aren't vibing with the season, that's fine. That's your prerogative. I'm not here to change your mind. I just think it's,
I would say two things too, in the defense of people who are feeling the pace at this point and feeling it as a bit of more of a slow presentation. we've now gotten like 3 episodes in a row of Rick talking about going to Bangkok, but not going to Bangkok.
True.
And we've gotten at least 2 episodes of people talking about the full moon party, but not actually being at the full moon party.
Sure.
And so there is a little bit more of a lead up in terms of some of those events that I'm hoping will really pay off when we get there. But there's been some serious prelude for those things.
That is completely fair. I want to do a quick section that I'm calling the well actually section, which is just people sort of correcting or weighing in on things. And to be clear, I'm not saying I don't like these emails. If it's a well actually email I don't like, I simply won't be reading it. But on this sort of like, is that Jason Isaacs in all of his natural splendor or not? We did get several emails about this. Rob, this is not what we're here to do. We don't need to dwell on this, but I will just say
no,
that, like,
I think we do, because I woke up Monday morning. I just had a very normal one. Poured myself.
This is not my fault, Rob. This is not my fault.
I'm just saying, I woke up, poured myself a cup of coffee, opened the old Prestige TV email box, and was met with a startling number of emails about whether British men are circumcised or not. Who am I to dispute people's area of expertise? But I'm just saying it's been a very normal one over here for the last couple days.
I just want to read my favorite one, which simply reads this. You guys, ellipses, British men are almost always uncut. It's not his. Love, comma, a gay man. So that's how our listener signed his email. That's how I will read it out. I sent that evidence to our pal Mallory Rubin.
Yes.
And her counter is that Jason Isaacs, the actor, is Jewish. So no matter what, he might be, circumcised anyway. That being said, Bill Simmons has told Mallory and me he has the straight dish on this, which he will be revealing on our episode 5 podcast. He hasn't told us yet. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
But Bill has got it straight from not the source, but
Wow.
like a source, and he knows. So the answer will come on the episode 5 instant reaction pod.
What a
with
tease.
Bill Simmons.
What a setup, Joe.
Stay
This is why
tuned.
you're a pro.
Stay
I will
tuned.
say this. I have no idea whether it's real or not. It does seem like in this show, which is not shy about male nudity, it
Yeah.
has been almost exclusively prosthetics. And in fact, I was watching an interview with Steve Zahn where he was talking about his prosthetic junk for season 1. What was interesting to me was not that it was a prosthetic. That's pretty common.
Yeah.
It was that he was presented with the prosthetic by Mike White to say, like, do you give the sign off on this prosthetic junk for yourself? So regardless if it is Jason Isaacs in all his glory or not, it is what he and many craftspeople believe that Tim Ratliff looks like.
A Jason approved item. Okay. In regards to the dry Tim Ratliff just dry necking some pills, which perturbed me. We had several people write in, a concerning amount of people perhaps, to let us know that lorazepam is sweet and will just dissolve on your tongue.
Yeah.
David wrote, clearly you've never been strung out on Ativan. It dissolves in your mouth without any taste at all. So thanks, David, and all the other people who wrote in about this. Now we know.
Yeah, look forward to our future video on the on the Ringer TV YouTube channel where we all take lorazepam and just coast through it together.
A lorazepod? Is that what you want to do?
I do want to do a lorazepod. I think it'd make for great content.
I think that we should do the White Lotus finale as a lorazepod. I think that sounds delightful to me. All right. And then on the lorazepam front, we got a lot of emails about lorazepam withdrawals and how nasty and sort of instantaneous they are. And the fact that, we were kind of joking a bit about like, okay, we've got lorazepam Tim, or lorazatim as some people are calling him on the internet. Great stuff. Love that for us as TV consumers. Vicky, lorazepam withdrawal. Vicky, what's going to happen there? I don't think that Mike White is intent on giving us like a harrowing
I don't
DT's
think so.
Episode of White Lotus, but I will just list some early withdrawal symptoms of lorazepam, a highly addictive drug that you should never go cold turkey on. This has been your PSA. Increased anxiety, irritability, insomnia, sweating, tremors. That's all stuff that I feel like, because that's like 1 to 3 days. We're only at the White Lotus for like 3 more days. So I feel like all of that is something that Parker Posey is completely capable of giving us without like us sending us down into a dark spiral of something. So
very much so. But the anxiety is already high.
Yes.
for Victoria. On the sweat front, it's going to take some work to outsweat Goggins in this episode, who is just moist, perpetually moist. But she could potentially catch up, if she goes into some shudders and sweating here.
Yeah.
I could really see it for her. Regardless, look, our girl needs help getting through like 2 conversations on the yacht.
Yeah.
She's going to come crashing back down to Earth real fast.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about that a little bit later, a little bit more, but there's a difference between what they are exposed to on the yacht and the sort of like, I'm just eating melon all day vibes of her existence at the White Lotus.
Well, quite, yes.
So I think that like it will be there's way less friction for her waiting back at the resort in terms of social anxiety and that sort of stuff.
But she was already popping the lorazepam at the resort eating the melon.
Just to get her massage.
That's
honestly.
what I'm saying. Just to take the edge off,
I can't believe she made it through that yacht ride. I was feeling for her. There are some looks that Parker Posey gives in this episode that are just like instant meme, like where they like move over Leslie Bibb, squid smile face. Some of these Parker Posey faces are making their rounds, but like
the cringe as she's watching these guys and their younger Thai girlfriends from across the boat is wonderful.
And then like kind of trying to settle her face and be like, this is fine. I do that. That's what my face does. I've been told quite often.
I also love the reaction to the reaction when she prompts the one Australian guy if he and his girlfriend are married. And he sighs so hard, I thought he might pass out. Like, he was just the mere question being posed, not appreciative of it.
Do you want to do a little, like, killing theory roundup? We got the tenor of the emails right now around sort of like who could have died, who did the killing, who is dead at the end of the season, are the exact kind that I like, where they're going back to previous seasons and they're like, let's look at what usually happens on a White Lotus. What kind of story is Mike White interested in telling us? Not like some wild cockamamie, I think a monkey got a gun. That's a me theory.
Speaking
but like
of, please email us at monkeyshootout@gmail.com. A very normal email address.
Or prestige@spotify.com. Either way. But what story could Mike White weave for us with any of these given deaths? And here are like a couple chief things that people wanted us to remember.
Okay.
Dawn, our listener Dawn, and a couple people, but like his email chiefly was talking about the way that our spoilers for previous seasons of White Lotus, Armand, who dies in season 1, and Tanya, who dies in season 2, were characters who did not have close emotional ties to anyone else on the show. Certainly Gary did not give a shit about Tanya, and even Portia was like not invested. Armand's like coworkers liked him, but we didn't explore any of those relationships too closely. And so
we explored some of them quite closely, but maybe not in that exact way.
Yeah, just because you go ass to mouth doesn't mean that you are like,
It's a kind of intimacy, I gotta say.
So the fact that the seasons don't end with like this plaintive mourning from any of our other characters, right?
Yes.
So if a Ratliff dies, then we have to grapple with the rest of the Ratliff family mourning. If Rick or Chelsea dies, that would be devastating to either Rick or Chelsea, I believe.
Yep.
If one of the fancies dies, I think that would be like maybe a little bit perhaps. So on the one hand, Mike White has said this season might be a bit darker than other seasons, so it's possible that he's going to zag in that direction.
Okay.
On the other hand, I think that is a useful thing to sort of keep in mind, is like how, usually when we like go to the airport and sort of see all of our characters, how they're existing after this vacation at the airport, it's not anyone sort of like dressed in black grief sobbing. That's not how we end a season of White Lotus usually. So that's something to think about,
Definitely so. And I would say, as an offshoot of that, maybe the variation for this season is not taking someone who has no ties, but taking someone who has them, sever them, and then they become vulnerable in their way, right? Like if the truth about what Tim has done gets out, all of a sudden those familial ties aren't as strong as they once were. And I think all of the Ratliffs would be spiraling out of control. I don't think Tim is the dead body. I think he has the gun in his hands almost too early in the story for him to actually be the one who ends up dead. But he could be involved in some way. It's like you can start to triangulate the way these things might connect, right? Tim has the gun. Guy Talk's potentially trying to get it back. We see this very like lingering shot of a security camera early in the episode where I would imagine Guy Talk is able to piece together the fact that Tim has the gun in the first place. You also have Belinda, who is jumpy at everything in a way that could keep her alive if Greg's Googling turns into ill intentions, turns into him coming after her. And so you can see all these people getting increasingly antsy. And obviously there's the gun in the middle of the room now that's going to change the dynamics of a lot of this stuff. But I have no idea which way it's going to be pointing at the end of the day. Other than I feel good that Chelsea will not die. She's almost been in too much danger too fast. I don't believe the final destination of what she's proposing.
Right.
And I don't think Tim is going to die. But other than that, I'm open to most permutations.
Some of the listeners are suggesting, because of this idea of like, who will we not be sort of like, I mean, actually, I was quite devastated that Armand died, but who will we not be like completely?
Who not a great guy, but a great character.
I don't know. A delight, honestly. Okay. But who will we not be devastated by? And so, some people are like, well, is it going to be Greg Gary? Like, could we possibly be so lucky? And I saw an interview that Jennifer Coolidge gave Variety where she said, quote, I hope they do something terrible to him. So shout out Tanya now and forever. But there is this like theory floating around that I think is interesting where follow me down this domino path. Belinda finally decides she's like, that guy did a murder. And I don't know how one calls Interpol, but she calls Interpol. And Interpol shows up, guns drawn or whatever, to capture Greg Gary. But Tim thinks it's the authorities there
who are there to
him.
get him. Oh, okay.
And Rick perhaps thinks it's the authorities following up on whatever it is that goes down in Bangkok. So like, hence monkey shootout at gmail.com. Like everyone thinks the guns are there for them, but and then panic and chaos ensues. So
I like that. I don't know how Belinda's going to get Interpol on the horn.
I don't know. Monkeyshoot@gmail.com if you work for Interpol.
If you work for Interpol, please hit us up. I would love to know mechanically how this works. I was actually thinking about it. Like once she finds out that Greg Gary is the guy she thinks that he is a murderer, what do you do if you're in Belinda's position, right? Do you go to the hotel staff? Do you call the Thai police? Do you call the American authorities? Especially because he's at least an expat, probably still an American citizen. Do you need to work out Italian extradition laws before you even start going to anybody?
I mentioned this, I think, on the pod with Bill and Mal, but I was looking up like Thai extradition laws, mostly because I was like, why do all these guys feel like they're safe here? Like, what's extradition like in Thailand? It turns out it's not as free and breezy as I thought it would be. It's not the crime shelter that I thought it might be.
No, but they're just there for the anonymity of all the other bald guys. It's just that you can't pick them out of a lineup.
Blend. You really blend, Okay, so here's the question though. For Tim, you mentioned sort of so like the noose is tightening on Tim. We're downing the lorazepams.
Yeah.
Jason Isaac on the official podcast gave this great interview where he was talking about how, on this theme of identity that we've been talking about all season, how like Tim is being stripped of all of the things that he identified as, like provider, father, pillar of community, good businessman, a
literal Boy Scout,
the son of this lineage, a man of notoriety at the club, all these things that he had sort of like
the club.
Not the club.
What will the people at the club think?
All these things that he had defined himself as, he's being stripped away. But is White Lotus a show where there are ever actually consequences for the wealthy, or are they inoculated somehow? And so will we come out the other side of this vacation? Tim is so convinced right now here in episode 4, they're going to lose the house. He's going to go to jail for a little time, like all this sort of stuff like that. They're going to be poor. None of his kids are equipped to live this life. Like, he has not prepared them for this. His wife is not equipped to live this life. Like, he has failed entirely. Would it make sense on a White Lotus show for this actually to not happen to Tim, for there to be no actual consequences for him at the end of the day, other than this dark week of the soul that he is experiencing in Thailand?
Yes, I think it would make total sense. And
Yeah.
I see there's two variations of that. One is a very internal dark week of the soul, where it is him going through all these possibilities, spiraling out of control, freaking out, and then the air is taken out of the balloon, and actually it's all going to be fine. Got
Yeah.
his lawyer cut a deal, something happened, Kenny Wynn is found liable for this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden Tim's off the hook. Or we had an emailer, Tim, reach out to us a couple episodes ago, honestly, about the possibility of Tim being out of touch with his phone. And we see him go back to the phone despite Pam's objections in this episode. Back to the phone today. But what if he spirals out of control? His family finds out the truth from him or from some other means. He has to deal with all the personal consequences of this. Maybe there's even some horrible outcome he can't take back, or the family is irrevocably broken. And then he gets back on his phone and, oh yeah, now everything is actually fine. And so it's not so much that real consequences come for people of this kind of privilege, but the most real damage that they can do is the damage that they do to themselves.
It's interesting because, one of our listeners, Peter, wrote in about this idea of a winner of a season of a White Lotus season. And this is like a way in which our beloved boss, Bill Simmons, likes to talk about stories. And usually that's not how I like to think about it. But I think it is interesting that, this listener brought up the fact that like Mike White loves a reality show.
Yes.
Was on Survivor, went quite far on Survivor, did The Amazing Race a couple times. We've talked before about how this is like sort of like a thinly sheened version of Survivor. He always puts Survivor players in every season and stuff like that. So like, is he thinking about his show as a story that has winners and losers? And I think your mileage may, like this listener, Peter, wrote in with who he thought won individual seasons. And I'm actually not sure I agree with all of his takes, but like, I think your definition of winning may vary at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But one thing that I always consider losing on a season of White Lotus, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is this idea of like the character that I'm rooting for to break free out of something, and then they just don't. And they just sort of like melt back into the world of privilege.
Yeah.
That we are sort of like or do not break the cycle. So I bring this up all the time, but I'll be in season 2 who I was like, you're not like your dad or your grandpa, and then at the end of the season he's at the airport ogling women just like his dad and his grandpa. Or Rachel and Shane in season 1. And so like the person that I most have my eye on for this is someone like, and we talked about this before, but someone like Piper, who is like, I'm not like my family. I'm not like my family. And inside of this episode, Vicky says to her, you're just as judgmental as I am. Like, you're just
And she's
like
very,
me.
very right. If not more judgmental, honestly.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. So, like, Piper is someone who won't be able to, like, go to the monastery and live a different life than her family has sort of planned for her.
Yeah.
But, and we got, another, word of encouragement from Richter about Rick, that Rick is someone who I'm hoping, though usually when I hope I get disappointed, but Rick is someone who I'm hoping can, you are not your story, right? You can break out of this karmic cycle and find something new for yourself. I just think that's, I don't know. Piper, I have no confidence in her, and I do apologize to her for that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go great. Honestly, it's a little thing, and maybe it's truthful, and we just haven't been given the full picture of what's going on there. Her referring to what I think we understand to be a temple or a monastery as a meditation center, I thought was kind of a telling little detail. It's like, for her, this is a very specific, very westernized, very sanitized kind of idea of what she's walking into.
Yeah.
And I think she's going to be in for a lot more than that. If she actually does end up there in any capacity at all, ultimately, I think she's going to walk to the edge and blanch. I think that's probably what the future of that character holds.
That's what it feels like, if previous seasons are any indication. I'm always like wondering if Mike White's going to zag and he'd be like, oh, you think you know what White Lotus is? You have no idea.
I love a zag. And Mike White is as adept with those zags as anybody, like in subverting our expectations.
He's a zaggy.
He is a zaggy. I don't like that.
I don't either. But we're gonna keep it in the pod. But you're never gonna say it again. Okay.
As far as Rick, though, like I'm glad you brought up them read a bit. As far as him letting go of his story, Because as soon as she said that, and then we get deeper into the episode and find out the extent of what Rick's story really is, which is a story that his mom told him about his dad, who is just the kindest, gentlest soul who has ever lived.
A do-gooder.
A straight Robin Hood type out here working for the good of the people, who was murdered in cold blood and definitely never did anything wrong, and also definitely is not Hollinger himself.
Yeah.
I feel like when Amrita's telling him that he can let go of his story, it's as much telling him he can let go of that story and not just this creation of who he is and his identity, but this, like, the only thing he really knows about himself and this formative gem that he has now created everything that we know Rick to be from is something that his mom told him on her deathbed that just, I'm going to say, does not seem to be very true.
Definitely not true. And also that idea that, like, okay, so there's two things, you know, when we're watching middle-aged men with daddy issues and stories, there's like two things that
you're going to need to be more specific. There's a lot of that going around.
All of it. That there's the energy of my father is a criminal, and so I'm a, you know, okay. So to take our guy Walton Goggins, Justified, which is just a show rife with daddy issues. You've got Raylan Givens, a character on Justified, who is a U.S. Marshal, and his father is a criminal, and this whole like the shadow that his father casts over him on that show, and the struggle that he has with like, I'm an upstanding law, but I've got this rage and this darkness inside of me that I think comes from my dad or whatever.
But he's a Zaggy at the end of the day. You
said we weren't gonna. Okay. And then you've got Boyd Crowder, whose daddy was also a criminal.
Sorry, his daddy.
His daddy was also a
Pronounce
criminal.
it correctly,
Thank
Joe.
you. But he has chosen a life of crime, and that's just the show, and it's the best. But for Rick, it's like, okay, I live in shame because my father was good, and I can't go to Australia for some reason. I'm something of a scoundrel.
Yeah.
And so like, how freeing would it be to not live under the weight of this like fictional saint who you think was your father and you have failed to live up to? The Vader comp, you and I were in on the Vader theory.
I can't believe we're here though. I can't believe this is what seems to be happening.
But I think you and I agree that Jim Hollinger is probably Rick's dad. And I just want to bust a theory.
Okay.
One that I've seen go on Reddit, and it reminds me of a conversation we had on Friday about severance. I really need people to like have a better understanding of how old people are, because a lot of people are like, could Greg Gary be Rick's dad? John Grace is 67 and Walton Goggins is 53. So I just need you guys all to like remember that. Technically 14-year-old dad. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
They're
of
the same generation. And like people I think are really desperate to understand why Greg Gary is here in such close proximity to a White Lotus. And so they're spinning all these theories about how he was involved somehow in the land deal with the Hollingers and stuff like that. I don't know that I agree with that, because I feel like if he had done all that, though he was part of the Land Management Bureau, but if he had done all that, would he need Tanya's money? Like, wouldn't he have money? So I don't actually think that Greg Gary is connected to any of that personally. But above all else, I do not believe that these two men who are quite close in age are father and son.
Yeah, associate makes more sense to the extent that they're connected at all, but I'm just not sure that Greg and Rick are going to have any overt connection in quite that sort of way, other than being at the same place at the same time. And as you said, maybe if the authorities get involved, they both think they're being chased in some capacity. I can see that sort of connection. I can see them bumping up against each other in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm a little disappointed we didn't get a little more yacht interaction between those two, because Greg was just sequestered on the top deck.
Rick also very much not wanting to talk to anyone.
Also very true. Two true lone wolves on the yacht. Never the twain shall meet.
One has a Chelsea and one has a Chloe, and those are two different things entirely. I
will say, I know Piper got the title in this episode, but Sourpuss Sad Sack Shithead is really Rick's title to lose. Like, he is wearing the crown in this episode, and Chelsea is over it, and I think rightly over it.
A reason I don't think that Rick is inside of the Greg Gary story necessarily is because Greg Gary is currently hunting Belinda and Saxon, like he's got like multiple people that he's sort of like predatorily staring at dinner. So
there's levels to this. Murder charges before girlfriends. I think that is his order of operations. He's got bigger fish to fry.
Just shifted.
Yes, but he is furiously Googling. There's a lot of great Googling going on in this episode. It's just Belinda and Greg Gary both connecting dots, trying to pull it all together. The internet is a magical place. Now, why couldn't he have done that Googling while he was on the yacht, sitting there by himself? There's no Wi-Fi on that thing. Is the reception that bad? I can't say I've been in the middle of the ocean on a yacht all that often. I imagine it's not great, but if you're on a 3-story yacht of that size,
that thing has to have some sort of satellite
Wi-Fi. There's no
situation.
connection whatsoever.
I've never been on any yacht. I think that's true. I don't think any boat I've ever been on would qualify as a yacht. So I don't think.
Are you a woman of the sea, Joe?
No. Well, okay. Yes and no. I love the ocean. It's like my favorite thing in the whole world. I get tremendously seasick. So
a woman of the beach.
A woman of the cliffs. I love to look out at
the
an
rocky
ocean.
Cliffs.
Yeah. Like great Northern California, like angry ocean. Love that. Don't want to be on it.
I was thinking more like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, sprint to the edge and come to a dead stop dramatically at the last moment.
Or Victoria Ratliff just sort of waving in with a duvet. Who's to say? We'll come back to Vicky's little ocean walk in a second, but on the Jim Hollinger front, we got a really interesting email that sent me a Googling. From a listener, Gower. This is what I'm calling the historical comps section. He said, quote, "When I hear Jim Hollinger, I keep hearing to myself Jim Thompson. I've been to Thailand and Bangkok many times and have visited the Jim Thompson house. I've also been to Koh Samui on a dayboat trip. So I'm fascinated with it all. I figured one white imperialist Jim as good as any other Jim. Of course, I know nothing about Thompson and too lazy to do the work. Maybe there's something there you might elucidate us on, or maybe it's nothing, just a thought." I did Google Jim Thompson because I had never heard of this person. Okay, here's a life goal, perhaps. It's one thing to have a Wikipedia page about yourself, right? The Rob Mahoney Wikipedia page. What if Rob Mahoney?
Is that a goal? Is that what we want?
I don't think it's. I don't have one. I don't need one. But
But you're a New York Times bestselling author, Joanna Robinson.
But you're NBA podcaster, Rob Mahoney.
These things are not the same.
But what if Rob Mahoney death had its own special page, not just a section,
its own breakout,
its own actual page.
Wow.
And this is the legacy of Jim Thompson, who was a sort of Thai silk magnate who sort of made big splashes inside of the industry, probably through shady business work in Thailand, was connected to a lot of famous people and a lot of government officials, and then he straight up disappeared. And to this day, they have not solved his death. And there's all these theories about what happened, the disappearance of Jim Thompson. And so, was he murdered by the government? Did he disappear himself because he was embroiled in something and wanted to vanish? All these things. I read all these articles about, there have been documentaries about what happened to Jim Thompson. And the truth is they don't know. And probably he just fell down somewhere and they never found his body. He went out for a walk and he never came back. And so
those rocky cliffs are perilous. You really got to be careful out there.
The prevailing theory is that he fell over and then they just never found it. It just got swallowed by Thailand itself. And that's poetic in its own sense. But I kind of like this idea that, sort of this infamous unsolved mystery of Thailand is something that might inspire Mike White to do the Jim Hollinger as a disappeared version of Rick's dad sort of story. I think that's really interesting.
Yes.
So,
and especially as a template, as we're seeing now, for what Tim is going through and the sort of self-disappearance he's at least considering in multiple ways, right? Yeah. It's not just him getting the gun, but him kind of talking out loud in his conversations with Greg Gary, right? I keep wanting to do Glenn Gary.
Glenn Ross, yeah.
Just sort of talking aloud in his conversations with Greg Gary about the hiding and seeking, and kind of the "do you like it here" question even feels kind of pointed in a way where it's he's at least kicking the tires and exploring his options as far as what happens if I have to stay here.
Yeah. It's to me, it's giving people wanting to play in the DB Cooper space, right? What is this unsolved mystery and how can I wrap it into sort of the story that I'm telling?
Yeah.
Elsewhere on the historical comp section, our listener Rachel wrote in about a North Carolinian Ponzi scheme.
North Carolinian, I think, right? My hand was hit pretty hard after I believe I said North Carolinian on an early episode of this
North
podcast.
Carolinian.
We're going to say North Carolinian. No disrespect to the Carolinians of all varieties.
I just really like the way that Jason Isaac says North Carolina. I don't know if it's accurate. That's for everyone else to decide.
I have to say, with all the accent work being done on this show, this is just a native accent, I think. But Pam's "oh no" when Tim comes to retrieve his phone is just a delight, and I've just been saying it aloud to myself. Ever since I finished the episode.
Pam is Pam before Lorazepam. That's what I have to say. Yep. I love Pam. She's the best. We did get an email from a listener who was like, why haven't you commented on how many Aussies there are on the show? And I'm just like...
Geographically, it just kind of makes sense.
Also, I just, having done like a smidge of backpacking around the world, I will say Aussies are like the most well-traveled people I've ever met. And so I just always expect to find Aussies wherever I go in the world. And they're the best. But Rachel wrote in to let us know that there was a guy probably named Rick Siskey who operated a sort of the most infamous North Carolinian Ponzi scheme. And house repossessed, all that sort of stuff, and did in fact kill himself rather than face the consequences of his own actions. So anything you want to say about the looming full moon party? We get this incredible closing shot of the boat headed towards the massive full moon. We get a really cool remix. It's called the Full Moon Remix of the theme song. You can find it on YouTube.
That was
it's
dope.
Really vibey. Anything you want to say about this, or what you're hoping from it, or anything you've learned about it?
I'm a little disappointed that we're only getting, it seems like, age-appropriate partiers going to the full moon party. I was really hoping that, you know, like a Gary or Rick or even like Fabian would show up at the party, like somebody who you wouldn't expect beyond just like the Saxon, Lachlan, Chloe, like Chelsea. Like those are people I can see going to a party like this. I wanted to see some fish out of water, and I'm a little bummed that it seems we may not get that. Now
that you've dangled the prospect of Fabian at the full moon
is
party
what I'm
in front
saying.
of me, I'm just gutted, genuinely. I will say this, monkeyshootout@gmail.com and prestigetv@spotify.com. Those inboxes have been full of people's experience going to Thailand. Some of these things, Rob and I will say, need not be shared with us. And but you guys sure have felt fine about sharing them. But some other things are just like fun travel log experiences, and we got emails from a lot of people who've been to the full moon party and just talked about like how bonkers and bananas it is and how fun it is, and just like neon painted people and mushroom smoothies and like all this sort of stuff like that. So I'm ready for the Bacchanalia to ensue next week. Speaking of Bacchanalia, you want to talk about how would you, Rob Mahoney, respond were you surrounded by children with super soakers in the streets of Thailand?
Enthusiastically,
joyously.
I think I would commandeer a super soaker and jump into the party. That seems like what I would be wanting to do. But the fancies are after a very, very specific, very, very narrow definition of fun, and very, I think, performative definition of fun. If we're taking it from Jacqueline's perspective, especially,
right?
Them responding as if they are in an active war zone strikes me as a little bit disproportionate to the small streams of water they are being sprayed with.
I wrote down travelers who hate actually traveling about them. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like they do not actually want any kind of experience.
Well, they lay it out pretty cleanly. What they want is to go sit by a slightly different pool with a slightly different vibe. But
then they did, and they didn't want that because
the olds were there.
The olds can't have the olds. For like both Victoria on the boat, having to talk to people she didn't want to talk to. What does she say to Saxon and Lachlan? Like, you want to stay longer on that boat? Something like that. Great stuff.
In their defense, all the people she hated talking to, it seems like left. At this
true.
point, it's people she might actually enjoy a little bit more.
I think she would have preferred the second round of the boat trip, but probably not once they get to the full moon party. But Victoria at the full moon party?
See, I would have loved to see that.
Absolutely. What can she replace her lorazepam with? You know what I mean?
Victoria in sweaty withdrawal at the full moon party. That's a great episode.
But Victoria and Jacqueline both have this just like really brittle shell, like this really thin shell that can so easily be broken of privilege. Just sort of Jacqueline is so used to, you think about all this all the time when you think about like extremely successful people in like, let's say Los Angeles, where I currently am. There's a way in which you were just surrounded and inoculated from like actual real life. And, you know, on the official pod, they were talking about the fact that like maybe Jacqueline has just simply not seen loose skin in the last decade because of like the life she lives in Hollywood. But yeah, this idea of just sort of like I float through life in this bubble of privilege that I've created for myself via fame or money or whatever it is, and how soft and unprepared they are for any kind of challenge to that. Which I think is interesting.
Well, and with that, just like such a tailored existence, not just in terms of the people you're surrounded with, but being able to do exactly the thing that you want to do and know exactly where you need to go to do it, or delegate that to an assistant or a PA or whatever. It's like, she's not a person who's had to make a lot of decisions for herself probably, or like actually go out and get things done for herself in a long time. And so this idea that her attempts to have party girl fun are foiled by basically just like a bad recommendation for Valentine, to be honest with you. She's like a really angry response to it. And I will say, with the fancies overall, and specifically with Jacqueline, you're seeing the sass is on Front Street right now. Like it is coming out. The passive aggression is coming up through her pores. And we're starting to see some real things happen between them. And I think a clearer dividing line between Jacqueline and the other two women than we've ever seen before, in terms of how they are looking at her and how she is treating them in this, which is very much, I am on vacation with my girlfriends. They are the tag-alongs on my journey to find us the appropriate party.
Because Lori and Kate were like, we're fine with this pool.
They were enjoying their drinks.
Yeah.
Enjoying
like,
the
sun. We got
sun.
our books, we got our drinks, like who cares? Yeah, Jacqueline is really interesting. I think it's all a powder keg, right? But especially Jacqueline, when we met her and they go to the villa, I mean, we knew it was bullshit from the start. When they get to the villa and she's talking to Kate and Lori in the first episode, she's like, do you like your rooms? I would sleep in a tree. Yeah. I don't really care. I'm not fussy. I'm fine, like with whatever. I'm just happy to be here. I don't need any pampering. I'm such a cool girl. And then to see her shriek and run from water guns was like deeply satisfying, honestly.
Also deeply satisfying to see the kids parked outside the storefront waiting for them to come back out.
Do you agree with the internet that seems to think that Valentine has set them up for that he was like, this will fuck with them?
Why?
I don't know, payback for being ordered around, like bossed around, perhaps?
I could see that. I honestly didn't read into it that way. I
think he was more just like, I got to go find my criminal cohorts so I can keep these women entertained. Yeah,
this is a place where you can spend a little bit of time if you were any kind of normal person on vacation and enjoy the scene, enjoy the festivities. But clearly, I see it more as like his inability to read them and what they're after, right? Like him sending them to the wrong party in the first place, him dropping them at, in the middle of this like market. Doesn't seem to understand what they're actually after or who these people actually are. And Jacqueline especially seems quite offended by that.
Too hot, too cold, party with some criminals just right, perhaps.
Yeah. No, they're definitely not criminals.
Okay. They definitely didn't rob the boutique in a previous episode?
No chance.
Okay. All right.
I will say, Joe, I want to give you all due credit because when we do see these certainly not robber friends of Valentine's, guy in the giant golden eagle shirt and guy with the snake tattoo that goes all the way to somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where or what the manifestation of that is. I kind of hope we get to see it now. You can't tease us with the snake tattoo and then not reveal it.
We have to see it.
But I would like to consult the text logs, Joe, because you and I were texting with our guy Jacoby, I think like 2 weeks ago about Valentine and some of the characterization here. And specifically, one thing you brought up was that he really should be named Alexei. By type, by look, this is an Alexei, and I have to tell you, Alexei has now arrived. He's simply Valentine's right-hand man and not Valentine himself. So I'll do credit for you for spotting the Alexei from a mile away.
I lived with a Ukrainian whose name was Alexander, who went by Sasha, and his friend was Alexander, who went by Kusha, I think it was. And then he had 4 friends named Alexander. They were all named Alexander or Alexei or something like that. So yeah, it was or Igor or Vlad or whatever. Okay. welcome to a segment I'm calling Joanna Justifies Her English Degree.
I love this for you.
We've
I love the way you're wielding your educational background, really putting it to work.
AKA Rob. Well, actually, one of these books is nonfiction. Rob does not like fiction. Let's see how he does with some nonfiction.
Okay.
Let's talk about what some books that people are reading. Belinda is reading a book that I believe Reddit has misidentified, and I have correctly identified. But this is what Reddit.
You're well-actuallying the well-actuallyers.
They're very close. Reddit thinks this book that Belinda is reading right at her like sort of private pool right before she does some Googling is a book called Surrounded by Narcissists, How to Effectively Recognize, Avoid, and Defend Yourself Against Toxic People, parentheses, and Not Lose Your Mind, bracket, the Surrounded by Idiots series, end bracket, by Thomas Erickson.
Okay.
Which sounds like a hilarious, great book to put into Belinda's hands. That book is a white cover with these sort of like colored circles on the front. What I think she's actually reading is Surrounded by Psychopaths, How to Protect Yourself from Being Manipulated and Exploited in Business, parentheses, and in Life, the Surrounded by Idiots series by Thomas Erickson. It is the same cover, but it is black, not white. And so I think it is actually another book in the Surrounded by Idiots series. But Belinda reading Surrounded by Psychopaths, How to Protect Yourself from Being Manipulated and Exploited in Business is like exactly what we think Belinda might read after her whole Tanya experience, right?
Absolutely.
And also Surrounded by Psychopaths. Is Greg Gary a psychopath? Should I go, Google him? All of that. That being said, I think everyone at the White Lotus could do with reading Surrounded by Narcissists. I say that without having read any of these
you don't know
books.
what's in there. I'd be careful, Joe.
Yeah, the Surrounded by Idiots series does not seem like one I really want to, like, Thomas Erickson seems like a real smug piece of shit, but, any inoculation.
So do many people at the White Lotus, in fairness.
Any inoculation we can do against narcissists or psychopaths, we want to do. Okay.
This was the nonfiction tome you were referring to?
It was. Anything that you nonfiction you don't read self-help though.
This is not my variety. No,
not
my genre.
You like history? What are we?
Yeah,
sports
long form nonfiction, John McPhee kind of stuff.
Oh,
like
John
that's
McPhee. Okay.
that's my zone.
Yeah. All right. Lachlan is reading a book called Hunger by Newt Hampson, a pro-Nazi guy. Cool story. Great, cool. Very cool.
All that iPad time really paying off.
Oh, yeah, that's why he's reading a book. I was like, why is Lockie reading a book? Because they took his iPad. Great point. Okay. And I have to wonder if this is perhaps Piper's book, because not that Piper would read a pro-Nazi. The book isn't pro-Nazi, just the piece of shit author is. But it just does not seem like something a high school senior would have lying around on vacation. But anyway, the novel recounts the adventures of a starving young man whose sense of reality is given away to a delusionary existence on the darker side of a modern metropolis, while he vainly tries to maintain an outer shell of respectability. His mental and physical decay are recounted in detail, his ordeal enhanced by his inability or unwillingness to pursue a professional career, which he deems unfit for someone of his abilities, is pictured in a series of encounters which Hampson himself described as, quote, a series of analyses. In terms of how we can apply this to Lachlan, if that's how intentional they're being with the books, which I feel like they usually are on White Lotus, just this idea of like the outer shell of respectability and the darkness that lies within. Like, is there? I mean, I don't know how you feel about close magic, close-up magic.
It seems to be working. I want to give him credit for that.
Is there a darker side lurking inside of the shell of respectability that is Lachlan Ratliff? What do you think?
Well, I think the shell of respectability is what Piper is bringing to him a lot of the time, right? It's this idea of like a certain kind of conversational decency, a blanching at some of the things that Saxon and Victoria say, for example, and the darkness that is increasingly winning is Saxon putting a beer in his hands and having him exercise and do some of that close-up magic for the ladies. And they really do seem to be enjoying it. You know, I'm not saying there's not a dark underbelly to close-up magic in general. Clearly there is. But Lachlan seems to be killing it with that.
I love magicians. I'm pro a magician. I don't have like a spicy magician take. Last but not least, back to Victoria and her duvet on wading into the ocean. Our listener Lauren wrote in about a book that most people read in high school, Kate Chopin's Awakening. It's a short story. And This is what Lauren wrote. Lauren wrote, the main character in that book taking her own life at the end. Sorry, spoilers for The Awakening. Taking her own life at the end by walking out in the sea after experiencing, quote, an awakening. Will Posey's character experience a similar awakening once her lorazepam runs out and she wakes up to her husband's situation? Will the result be similarly tragic? Now, again, I don't think that, like, we're going to see Victoria standing on the edge of the ocean in, like, episode 3 and then literally walk into the ocean at the end of the season. That all feels a bit too telegraphed for what a White Lotus season usually likes to do. But I think, you know, in terms of metaphorical oceans, metaphorical drowning, that's certainly something that could be on the cards.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
I agree with you that it's a little too overt.
Yeah.
That's what's always so hard with White Lotus is the line between clue and such overt red herringism.
Yeah.
And that one almost, it feels too obvious. It feels too above board. Everything I feel like that's going to be leading up to the extent that anyone is dead, which again, we don't know that anyone is at all, will not be somebody who is overtly talking about death and dying so much over the course of the scene. That's going to be my guess. But who knows what happens?
I've got 2 more sort of like prompts for you
that
I prepped you on. Before we get to those, anything else you want to make sure that we talk about in terms of this episode?
On the Saxon and Lockie front, now that they're shipping off to the party,
yeah,
why do I feel like these two are one party drug away from doing something super weird?
Because that's been the vibe all season.
The incest just keeps getting escalated and escalated and escalated, and I'm just imagining true to the bacchanalia, true to the debauchery that could potentially happen at the full moon party, some giant group ordeal in which they are both somehow involved and end up getting challengers into this thing. I'm concerned, Joe. I'm not looking forward to it, but I just see bad things ahead for these two.
I gotta say, Rob, I love podcasting with old people at the Ringer, but the way that you say like group ordeal in this like true sort of Texas gentlemanly fashion.
It's a hootenanny. It's a true hootenanny,
versus
Joe.
The way that Mallory Rubin talks about things is like it's pretty delightful. Yes, some group ordeal feels like it could very we're just like, yeah, you're right, one party drug away. Anything else you want to talk
about? Just one quick shout out to Chelsea for a lethally effective cry pout.
Yes.
I don't think that I fully understood the power of Amy Lou's teeth specifically and what it would bring to the pout situation, but it's a level of escalation that's just not even fair, and you understand why Rick is effectively powerless against it.
Can I say one thing on the that's a great shout. Can I say one thing on the Piper front? Sarah Catherine Hook, who plays Piper, said that this was her favorite episode of the season.
The one we just saw.
Yeah. And I was just like really surprised by that. Because she has a great scene with Tim on the boat. I really like that scene. And something that Jason Isaacs talked about on the official pod was that like Piper was definitely Tim's favorite kid, and that he like his son's.
We got that from the gentle caress of her face as he's breathing like a dying rhinoceros. Like it's a weird vibe,
whatever. Anyway, that she's a daddy's girl, that he loves her most of all this sort of stuff like that. But like, if that's Sarah's, like, I don't know why. Maybe she was like, it was just fun to be on the boat or whatever, or it was fun to be around everyone. But I was like, I hope Piper has like a bit more of an exciting episode than this one on the cards, or is her vibe just like sort of subdued for the rest of the season? I don't know.
I think she will. Yeah, I mean, what's weird about that is you often hear that shooting for TV and film on and around boats is very complex and very annoying. Not a pleasant experience for the people involved. And so on the one hand, yes, you're on a yacht, but you're shooting on a yacht, which is not quite the same thing. Maybe she enjoyed it just because she gets to vibe out. She doesn't have a lot to do this episode, and so she just gets to hang out, sip on a drink, and not be concerned with the angles and the boom mics for this particular part of the proceedings.
We've talked about a wet bump on this pod before, right?
Have we?
Okay. It's usually for background actors, but this idea that if you do a scene and you get wet during that scene, you get a little bit extra money. It's called a wet bump. It's just
I don't think we have talked about this.
Yeah, I talked about it a lot when I did the TV when I did the podcast on Lost. We talked about the wet bump a lot because they are constantly soaked on that show. All right, these
in that case, Michelle Monaghan, Carrie Coon, Leslie Bibb.
Yeah, Get your
Just
wet bump.
bumping through the roof this episode.
Get your wet bump. All right. Belinda's Googling Tanya. Freeze frame Mahoney strikes again. Was prepared for my question when I texted it to you earlier today. They're making a Tanya biopic.
It's in the works. The rights have been acquired.
This is okay. So my question was like earlier. I was thinking if they kill Greg Gary, then that's the end of the Tanya, Greg, Belinda sort of saga, right?
Maybe.
But if season 4, a la Scream 3, Scream 2,
spoilers for the entire Scream series, I guess,
is about the movie about the victim of an earlier season, then we keep Tanya's spirit alive.
Yes.
They're making a Tanya biopic. Who plays her? Rob Mahoney.
I ended up with 3 answers.
Okay.
1, Jennifer Tilly. Maybe I'm just being Jennifer biased here, but I feel
Great pick.
I feel like she could really pull off the
Yes.
Coolidge element pretty effectively.
Wonderful.
2, Catherine Hahn going full ham mode. I could also see that. The other one I think is a bit more of a reach given the roles that she likes to play, but I've seen such incredible range from Melanie Linsky that I could see her playing up in a way that she doesn't often have an opportunity to do, and being a proper Tanya McQuad, voice and all.
That is such a wonderful roster, and bless your heart for picking age-appropriate actresses. Here's what I think is going to happen.
Oh, sorry, Sydney Sweeney was the 4th one.
Ariana Grande. Ariana Grande, who does a killer Jennifer Coolidge impression, famously, gets a taste of that Oscar buzz for Wicked, and is like, I'm going to go full Oscar. I'm going to play this doomed heiress and do a whole impression. And she's going to be like fully 20 years younger, 30 years younger perhaps than she actually is. But that's Hollywood, baby. That's Hollywood, baby. So
she could at least be part of the origin story, like the prologue, right?
Oh,
like,
sure. The flashbacks.
You know, all the flashback sequences at minimum. Like
maybe it's just called
I've heard the
Young
impression.
Tanya. You know?
Honestly. Why have we not gotten Young Tanya? You know, these are the spinoffs we deserve.
Me, Tanya. Me, comma, Tanya.
Me, Tanya. I feel like McQuad is such a great word, though. We need McQuad in there somewhere.
Oh, it's like McBain. Okay, last but not least. And this is a game only for Rob Mahoney because it has unfortunately been spoiled for me. Rob and I want to issue, like, I guess, a very mild spoiler warning. This isn't, I don't think, actually a spoiler, but if you are, like, hot spoiler averse, you can bail out of the pod now. We can thank Donnie Beacham, John Richter, and Justin Sayles for their work on the pod, so you make sure to hear that acknowledgement, and then you can peace out. But we're about to talk about something that is not like a plot point from an upcoming episode, but something that is sort of out there in the air, and we want to talk about it. So you've been warned. A thing that happens on White Lotus, Rob, is that like midway through the season, often a new character, a new actor enters the mix. Tom Hollander in season 2, Molly Shannon in season 1. In an article in USA Today, it was revealed that a big guest star is coming on the show. We will see them in the next episode, episode 5. And USA Today revealed that it is an Oscar-winning performer. No, not gendered, actor or actress. Oscar winner, next episode. And HBO has like kept a lid on who this is. They have not. They asked press who had screeners to not talk about it, stuff like that. So this is all the information we have. Episode 5, Oscar winner. So Rob Mahoney.
Yes.
We've already had Kiwi Kwan, but that's not who we're talking about. We had a Laura Dern voice cameo in a previous season. Which Oscar winner do you think is coming to White Lotus next? And which role do you guess or would you like to see them play?
I'm going to take you on a long walk, Joe. I've got 4 tiers of guessing / not guessing that's going to happen here.
Hell yes. All right.
Tier 1, the person I hope, with all due respect, that we do not get. Jamie Lee Curtis. It's been done. We've seen it. The Bear. Great. Love it. Let's move on. Let's get some other people in the mix. 2, if only Jessica Chastain or Tilda Swinton were on this show, who I think would be wonderful fits for the White Lotus universe. I think maybe
Jessica.
A little too starry for the kinds of performers we usually get in these roles. So I'm going to say that they're probably not going to happen. Some other possibilities that I'm going to throw on the board, but I don't think are quite fitting the bill of what I'm looking for. Brendan Fraser, who I think would make sense in sort of timeline, makes sense in sort of like the kinds of roles that he might be up for. J.K. Simmons, who I think could be wonderful in all sorts of roles, criminal, Interpol, guest at the hotel, otherwise. I think Mahershala Ali would be awesome on this show, and also is the kind of like chameleonic performer where I could see him doing any variety of things in terms of how a guest star would show up. But my actual guess is Eddie Redmayne as a raver going full Burning Man mode at the moon party. I just think he has that juice in him, and maybe that's like a little Jupiter ascending, whisper shouting dynamic play going on there. But I could see that for him.
Okay. Eddie Redmayne with the party drugs
Yes.
at the full moon.
That's the
rave.
official Rob Mahoney guess on the guest star. So I guess we'll check back in a week and see how we did.
That's great. All right. That is my attempt at a neutral response to your guesses, but I enjoyed all of them equally, as Severance would want me to.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back later this week with Severance for sure. The Pit, ? When, we don't know, but we are recording an episode this week about The Pit, so you can either stop or actually start your emails. PrestigeTV at Spotify.com. PrestigeTV at Spotify.com with your Pit thoughts. We want to hear them.
Your pith thoughts? There's a pun there. I'm gonna abandon ship on that one. I'm gonna zaggy
up.
I'm gonna zaggy that thing straight out of here.
Especially if you're David Jacoby, who sent us, I don't know, 100 text messages about The Pit. So keep them coming, Jacoby. You're the best.
Please.
Severance emails, pineapplebobbing@gmail.com. If you guys are on the edge of your seats about it, the AirPods did go to a good home. Our hardworking video producer, John Richter, got the AirPods to give to his wife. So
hell yeah,
they went to a good home. And that's it. Rob Mahoney, you're the best. And I'll see you 2 more times. But then after that, I'll see you at the full moon party. Okay.
Can't wait.
Bye.